Hey everyone. Um, this is going to be a different format than we're used to seeing here on the Narrative Hearts platform. Um, if you've been following along, you know there have been a couple of guests uh, we've had, and also a couple. Had a narrative niblet episode where I read a couple short pieces or a short piece. Um, Today, I thought I would uh, just take a minute to um, share some poetry. I've been in the poetry headspace lately, juggling a few projects at the moment. I've been dealing with some life stuff, which is primarily why there's been such a gap in the release of material. I'm working on trying to find a more consistent job as a result of the pandemic, having lost my day job, and putting together odd jobs, odd projects to earn some money, a little bit of money, and so still in that bit of that predicament these days, concerned about how to pay bills and also maintain a level of comfort that would allow me to continue to write and create and do stuff. Obviously, that's not uh, maybe it's not 100% realistic, but just thinking about trying to figure out ways to earn income and still take part in some of the things that I love doing. Um, Help keep me sane, keep me out of sadness. Anyway, today, I'm sitting outside in this nice sunny afternoon. Uh, it's not quite clear skies. It's mostly clear. There's some sort of streaky clouds in the sky right now. I had a minute before I took off and ran some errands. Um, and I thought I would share some poetry things since this is still April and it is National Poetry Month. And I have been scribbling out poetry, which I was doing before this month, but I thought I would take a minute to talk about what that looks like um, here. So it's really about negotiating space around that. And I think what's happening really now is I'm working on a book of poems and lightly trying to figure out what I want to do with that. I'm not quite sure what it looks like yet, so I'm still sort of figuring that out. I had a bit of a interruption, so I had to move spaces. So I'm not outside anymore. I'm inside, and that's okay. So I was talking about poetry and stuff, and sort of where my head was, and one of the things I am working on in conjunction with the two novels that I've sort of in the process of editing and or transcribing, so they're in various stages of work. The third project that's happening right now is a book of poetry, and I had sort of dabbled with this idea back in graduate school. My thesis project was a book of narrative poems with some drawings that I had in there too. And you'll have to forgive there's some yard work happening around here, so forgive the noise. But but yes, thesis project was a book of narrative poetry with some drawings. There were narrative, like almost like comic book, comic strip type stuff. So as a way to sort of engage in the conversation with the material that was different than what one might expect. And with the idea of this poetry book that I'm working on now, I wanted to take that idea more seriously, like the idea of actually full on writing a book of poems. I had been reading a couple books from friends that I respect. One I connected with over Instagram a few years ago. I was so taken with her poetry, and we became friends on Instagram, and then we did a couple Zoom calls over, after about a year and a half, whatever, of sort of connecting. And then she had a book of poems come out, and I read that book, and I loved the book. I was emotional, and it broke me. It's a rumination on grief and loss and hope too. And it got me thinking. It was one of the things that got me thinking about my own poetry and how poetry is one of my great loves in the world of writing. Next to fiction, I think, I would, once I came to understand poetry better as a young adult, I fell in love deeply with the form and the medium and just the ways in which you could express yourself through words that was not always so literal, and but it can really get to a feeling. And I thought, well, why don't we do this for real? Let's do it real, like earnestly. So I figured, I would try that, and I don't know what's going to happen with these pieces and how long it'll take me to get them to a place where I feel like they feel good. But right now I'm just enjoying the process of writing and trying to express these things loosely. The project right now, it's really, I don't know if I have a full title on it, but I think the theme of it though is really like about having a conversation with a spirit that is like your other, like they're you and they're not, and yet you understand each other on a way, on a level that's sort of unspoken. There's something about that. I think where it comes from is I've had a lot of, and I have currently a lot of different relationships with several of my friends, all of them female. That the way in the ways in which this relationship um, means something in terms of how I'm talking about it. Like there have been sort of soul to soul connections, and in a way that's not necessarily conventional. How most people might think, oh, that's a romantic relationship, or there may be elements of those things in that, but it's actually deeper and further than any. It goes further than any conventional sort of expected uh, dynamic. And I think these new poems that I'm working on now, sort of grow out of that idea that these are conversations you're having with different parts of yourself. But when we have friends or people we connect with, I think sometimes we see parts of ourselves in them, and vice versa, which is why there's a connection in the first place. Or you see something that you don't have and that you want to have around you, like someone's really fun, or they have certain energy about them, or they move a certain way that is not how you move, but you feel like you can be friends with this person, you can be connected to them, and that person is enriching your life in some way, and you hope you bring that to someone else's life too. And so I think really that's sort of the basis of where this new idea of book of poems is coming from. And so I thought what I would do, sort of in celebration of that notion, and sort of the idea of sort of poetry in general, I would just read a couple things, maybe a few pieces. And I thought I would start with, actually, I have my old my master's thesis on my lap here, and it's called "Heart of a Hero." It grows out of the idea that anybody can be a hero. And it really takes some inspiration from the notion of superheroes, but not just superheroes, like epic heroes, heroes from different, stories. But the superhero is where that sort of came, that was part of where the conversation began. And then I started thinking about it more broadly. The idea that someone's dog could be their hero, or a teacher, a friend. These things can come in, these people and entities and spirits can come in and save us at different times, and so you can see them in a way that they're other types of heroes. There are smaller heroes, quieter heroes that move from a more subtle place. Everything is not always about brute strength or outward flashy power. There's such a thing as quiet power, and those who utilize that can be heroes too. So I'll read a couple pieces from this book here, this thesis project, Heart of a Hero. And trick is now figuring out what the heck to read. I should have probably planned it better, but I thought, oh well, it'd be fun to sort of flip through and see what's cool about it. So I'm flipping through this first sort of movement, first part of it, and I'm finding a couple pieces that might be cool too. Oh, you know what? Here's one that I thought was. I look at the first couple lines and they reminded me immediately where the poem came from and what it was about, and so I think I'll read it first and then I'll talk about the story behind it. This one's called Kryptonian Connection. She was very quiet. The wavy-haired Latina sitting next to her friend on the bunk across from me. She was quite reluctant to place her trust in me, I knew. Hidden behind her silence when given the floor to speak, she looked away bashfully. She felt none could relate to her, as though she were a strange visitor from a foreign planet. I noticed the emblem of the last son of Krypton all over her pajama pants she wore as she moved near me. I wanted to reach out, to show her that she wasn't alone. A touch upon her arm received her attention. Pulling up the leg of my jeans, I sported flaming S's on my own pajama pants underneath. She giggled at this. The two of us, outsiders sharing an insider's moment, honorary Kryptonians. The symbol conjures up thoughts of that soft-spoken Latina who opened up finally, like the mild-mannered man revealing himself to the world as super. I read that and I have a soft spot in my heart for the young lady who I thought of when I was working on that piece. The story behind it comes from I was a camp counselor for a program called Camp Everytown, which I will sing its praises forever. It's changed it quite a bit since I was a part of it, but man, it was such a beautiful experience. We had high school students who were what they called they were delegates, people who were handpicked to come to this camp. They were chosen to represent, a higher standard that when they came back to their school, they could share what they learned at camp with their fellow students. in the hopes of sort of making things better, making the world around them better. And I might have been, at the time, I must have been like 22. No, I was earlier than that. I was 20, later than that. I was 26 or something like that. 25, something like that. 24, 25. And this was my first camp. I think my first camp experience. I did a couple of them. This is my first camp experience. And we were in a group discussion. We had a breakout group discussion. And we're in one of the cabins. And I was a staff person. As a counselor, anyone who's not a delegate is a counselor or staff person. So I was a counselor. And I was sort of one of the facilitators for this group discussion we were having about, I can't remember what the topic was. But we were sharing, it was getting kind of personal and stuff, and some of the delegates were sharing their piece. And my fellow Kryptonian, she was very shy and very quiet. And, she was wearing her sleep stuff, so I noticed she had Superman pajamas on. And at some point in the conversation, I was close enough to her where I could see that, and I could reach out and touch her. I touched her shoulder and said, "Hey," and I pulled up my pants. I was wearing mine on underneath my jeans, and so I had some Superman pajamas too, with the fire, they were fiery emblem. It was very sweet. We acknowledged each other, and we smiled and sort of giggled. And from that day, she was a little bit more open. She started opening up a little bit more, and by the end of it, it was very sweet. We were separated and we hugged, and it was just the sweetest thing to see in such a short period of time, to see her go from this quiet, shy girl to sort of blossom a little bit in like 3 days. It was like three or 4 days, whatever, of time. Camp was very short, and you covered a lot of ground, and you revealed a lot, and people got really emotional in such a short span of time. I loved that program so much. I learned so much, and the only thing, I think my only complaint about it was that everything was packed in 3 days, and you didn't really have time to unpack your emotions or whatever came up for you. Super powerful experience, but this was a special piece. Looking at this poem, and I'm immediately taken back to that day in the cabin where all of us were talking, and just it's a little moment, but it meant something. And that's the thing. One of the other things I think is beautiful about poetry in general, how something so mundane, something so small, can be something. An idea of trying to express what that is in a way that's different than writing it out in your journal or telling someone the story verbally. When you write a poem about it, you are taking a small moment, and you are literally analyzing that moment from all these angles and figuring out what's a unique way to describe what this moment was and what it was about. You can say what happened, and it's just what happened. But you can talk about what happened from a perspective that is more nuanced and more layered. You can take words and play with them and have one word mean 3 things, and they all could apply in the same poem. I think that's such a beautiful thing. It's very simple. Like what I shared. The story is just, hey, we're in a cabin, we're having a discussion. A lot of the high school kids were quiet. Some of them were shy. Some of them were not. And you're sitting next to someone who I see is shy, and in a way to sort of help her feel more connected. I touched her and said, hey, me and you have the same thing, and we giggled, and that was it. That's it. That's really all that happened. But in the poem, there's a whole bunch of things that, or in a poem, a different poem, this poem sort of does some of those things, but even if a different piece about this, you're noticing different things about the moment. what did she look like? What was her body language? And then you're playing on also, like, the poem is called Kryptonian Connection. So it's playing with the idea that we are two different people from two different backgrounds, different generations, and yet the one thing that bonded us in that discussion, beyond probably some of the similarities of what we experienced growing up or whatever it is, was our pajama pants and how they both bore the same crest, the same logo. Superman is one of those sort of universal things. Like the logo is so iconic that it's probably not that uncommon to find people wearing that type of thing. But in that moment, no one else was. We were the only two people that wore pajama pants, bottoms, that had the Superman crest. And I know myself, I know I can be very shy. And so I recognized her shyness. I would have been, I might have been the same person and were I in her position. But I would have felt more connected to someone who had tapped my shoulder and showed me their Superman pants. Anyway, I thought it was beautiful. And there's this notion of like being an outsider. If you know anything about Superman, the context of that, he's an alien from another planet. By definition, he's an outsider. And the couplet in the poem about the two of us being outsiders, sharing an insider's moment, that's what it felt like. It would be as if Clark, it's like Clark and Kara, depending how you pronounce it. It's Kara in different iterations. Some people call her Kara. But if you're Clark and you're on Earth by yourself, he's the only Kryptonian. When Kara gets there, and for those of you who don't know, Kara Zor-El is his cousin, Supergirl. When she gets there, he's not alone anymore. Yeah, he's got Batman and Wonder Woman and other friends, but there's no one who understands the context of that better than a fellow Kryptonian. And Kara gives that to him. So similarly, that was what this moment was like. That's what that felt like. And I think that was what made it so lovely. And it's nice to know that she's okay. There's not a lot of communication these days, but I think it's to know that she's enjoying life and she's got a family and she's got two beautiful boys, and when I see her on social media, it always warms my heart. So that was that poem. So I'm going to read one more, I think, from this document here, or from this manuscript, and then I will, I think, share something that is newer in terms of like, but that's not sort of polished, Oh, here's another one. I think that's pretty good. Oh man, there's a couple that are cool. So here's one. I'll read this one again now, and I'll share the story behind it. This one's called The Fire Tamer. I tried. I did attempt to appear as though grief could be neatly packaged. Yet the first person I saw, weightless, seemed to take note of my tough task. How are you? I paused before answering. I could have lied, put on a mask, but pretending is hard work and isolating. So real was my loss, it was surreal. She sensed this, floating somewhere. I lost a friend, I uttered up to her. A death that stripped a life from me and declined into the mania of my grief, a byproduct of life's inequality. From the anger and regret within, she pulled me back up to her, an experienced rescuer. My mess was nothing fresh to her. She held me in the vacancy of air, no judgment or pity, just an understanding. I came to my senses in that solemn state of mind. I had company as my face burned for a long half minute. This is another piece that is autobiographical and feels very poetic in the ways that some of the language is written, that I'm looking at now. I haven't looked at this poem in a long time, and it almost doesn't feel like I wrote it. But the speaker is obviously going through some stuff, and excuse me, he had a hero come in and rescue him. That's who the fire tamer is. This grows out of a conversation that came up actually during my time in graduate school. I had a friend who was in my cohort, another writer, and at the time she was a retired firefighter for like 25 years in San Jose. April. I have to say her name. She's a lovely person. And I was always in awe of her. April, this is what's a little fun fact about her. She was born in April, in the month of April, which meant she's earlier in April, so she's an Aries, which is a fire sign. And what the heck, a stroke of, I don't know what you call it. What would you call it? I don't know. That's a spiritual something, universe, cosmos made it so that she would grow up and become a firefighter. You have a woman who is a fire sign who became a firefighter. Studied, you have to at the time. I don't know what the requirements are to be a firefighter these days, but you had to take a fire science class. So she understood her fire sciences, and had loved, felt, understood the beauty, but respected its respected the power of fire. A lot of fire things going on, in terms of fieriness, heat, but also warmth. And April was tremendously warm. She had a fire about her, but she was warm, and just a beautiful spirit. And this piece grows out of an interaction I'd had with her during my time in school. I had a friend pass away, and I was very sad. She was a dear friend who was at the time one of my oldest friends in terms of age. She was 104, and she was a mentor, and she was just a dear person. And this was my first year in graduate school, and I was, a mess. And this day, I was sort of hanging out somewhere on the grounds, and April had saw me, and she'd asked how I was. She was so bubbly that day, and light, and I would, I tried to meet her, but I couldn't. She asked me how I was doing, and I took a moment to respond to her because I was thinking about whether or not I should lie and just say, "Oh, I'm tired," or what. But I just said I lost somebody, and she just held me in it. She gave me a hug and just held me, and I just I cried, and I felt like she came in, and I was out adrift somewhere in my own sort of sea of grief and pain and sadness, or whatever. And April just came in and we talked for a minute, for a second, and then she just gave me a hug, and that was this is what I mean when I'm talking about anybody can be a hero. Now, April, as a firefighter, that's a by many that profession is seen as a sort of heroic and noble profession, and it is. Your job is putting your life on the line to, you're saving property, structures, and stuff. You're saving people too, and in a different way, April did that for me. In that moment, I was struggling, and she swooped in and saved me. So that's where the fire tamer comes from. And obviously, the fire tamer is it's a play on fire and sort of. And April, as a former firefighter, knowing that about her, and also sort of like that's what firefighters do. You're taming fires. you're you're quelching them, you're putting them out, but if they're out of control, you bring them under control and then put them out. And in a sense, there was a fire in me of like an inferno of pain, and April used her sort of nurturing her skills uh, in a different way, different set of skills, but they spoke to the same type of. She calmed the fires, in me a little bit. And anger, the fire of anger and the fire of, grief and sadness. So she was still fighting fires in that way. Yeah. April. She's a wonderful spirit. So I think now I'm going to shift gears and actually read something newer that I had written recently. I'll probably read a couple pieces. So this is I want to share one actually in particular. This one was something that was fairly special as it came up to me. I have a friend in the Ukraine who's dealing with obviously living in daily anxiety and fear around what's happening in her country with the war going on and raging on for 60 plus days now. And I wrote this piece sort of in response to something she had put out, a video of herself singing, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd seen that day. It made me cry, and I had to send a picture. I don't know what compelled me to do this. I don't normally do this. I took a picture of myself in tears, sent it to her. I just wanted her to see, I don't know, the effect. Excuse me. The effect that her voice had on me, because it was profound, really, and I was so moved that I just said, okay, well, something compelled me to write something, and so I'll read this to you, and then I'll maybe talk a little bit more about what this is about. This piece is called DH. They're the initials of her name. The sound of your voice, surrounded by the darkness of a cold bunker, comes through like a candle burning at the far end of a tunnel. Stubbornly, it stays alight, no matter how sharp winds cut through cracks in the walls, damaged by explosives just outside, threatening to stuff it out. Facing the loss of normalcy, of safety, of people, cut down like branches of a collective tree that won't grow back. You release melody from the depths of your heart. How? Where does the will to emit such resplendence come from when your home is under attack? How do you not sink from defeat? How do you continue to give and art and live and share and still care and hold anger and love and wear survival like armor like a badge of significance, strikes fear in the hearts of outlaws. A marshal of the Wild West, your country has become a muse of being, a being of magic, too determined to stay afraid, too tired to care, where hope becomes belief more than 40 days on, and no foreseeable end here. You sing and stirring spirits and bringing forth tears so easily, like turning on a faucet of feelings that draw from a well so deep it becomes impossible to put words to context, to nuance, to the unspoken of spirit. But the attempt is what matters. That you sing it all means something. That you sing in the dark, trying to hold on to your heart, hold on to the muse within you, means more. Hold on. Hold on. So, my friend Daria, she's a wonderful Ukrainian artist, and you can find her work on Instagram. I will I will try to link her handle in the description because I don't want to run the risk of mispronouncing her last name, so I will just link it in the description somewhere. She's a beautiful spirit, and her artwork is just so wonderful. She's such an inspiration, and she's trying to maintain a sense of positivity and a sense of hope in the midst of such a dark time she's living in now. But and so this poem is really a piece to honor her and honor the Ukrainian spirit and what honor the situation that's going on there. I thought, just as an aside, I wanted to, as I was writing about singing in the midst of darkness, I was reading about birds, because birds was one of the things I was going to play with in the poem. You know, singing in birds, it's always that's such a sort of, I feel like it's a cliched comparison to make. But when I dug deeper into the reasons why birds sing and how they communicate, and one of the reasons, one of the reasons they do is to, obviously to attract a mate. But one of the things that was most fascinating to me was that some birds sing to defend their territory, and it was appropriate, I think, in the notion of like where Ukraine is and how they're defending their territory. The Ukrainians are defending their home from invasion. It's the reason the war is still going on. Part of the reason it's happening because they have not given up. They're still fighting, still protecting, trying to maintain their homeland. And so the notion of a bird singing to protect its homeland seemed appropriate. Though I couldn't figure out a way to work it into this piece, but I thought that was interesting, and I thought I would just note it here. So, anyway, I thought I was going to share another piece, but I think I might end this episode here. Give myself some time to look it over and see how I can get out some of the interruptions. This was a bumpy one, but I'm glad I just pushed through to get it done. Because I feel like every time I try to do one of these things, something else comes up and I'm not doing it. And I didn't want that to happen this time. So forgive the lack of quality. I hope you can find something in this that is pleasurable and enjoyable. If you spent your time and energy listening to this, if you're still here at this stage, thank you for taking the time to listen. And in the meantime, I will be back with more of these, more things like this, I'm sort of still in the space. I have some other things that I might want to share at some point, but for now, I think that's going to be it. Thank you again for taking the time to listen, and come back again next time. I'll be back. I'll be here. Hope you have a good day or evening if you happen to be listening to this in the evening. And yeah, be well.